So welcome, as Peggy says. I think this is the third year we're holding the ASO, fourth year that we're holding the ASO Conference. Super good to see you all here. I've been the design lead at Phiture since mid-2018. I used to talk to a lot of people, but since COVID, that's been from kind of behind a screen. So this feels a little bit new, and I'm just a tiny bit shitting my pants. So this topic is going to be probably one of the less technical topics on the list, but I think it's probably still really worth discussion. And today I'm going to be talking about keeping creative when you're working in ASO long term. And the reason that that is relevant is because ASO and CRO in particular doesn't really have an end date. I can't really imagine any of us kind of throwing in the towel and saying, well, our optimization efforts are done now. And if you do say that, I'd love to see what your manager says. And over the long term, we're all going to see a bit of fatigue set in, right? Creative fatigue. And if you're trying to generate new ideas for a question that you've been answering for months or maybe even years, eventually at some stage it's going to feel like you've hit a brick wall and your proverbial well will seem dry. Add to that, there are all these rules, right, that the stores have. You can have this many screenshots at this size. You can't talk about this, this, and that. You can't show this, this, and that. And that's a challenge. That can feel frustrating sometimes. The good news, however, is twofold. We all feel like that sometime. I know my design team feels like that sometime. I feel like that sometimes. And number two, there are things that you can do to break that and hopefully to shoot for long-term creative output. So as far as possible, I'm trying to make this relevant to both agencies / consultancies and also publishers. There'll probably be a slight bias towards agency since that's my experience. But regardless, at the end of the presentation, I hope that you'll all be able to add something to your toolkit. Okay, so I'll be grouping this under three broad themes: culture, people, and processes. It's not really in any particular order, although it does move from quite broad with culture to quite narrow with processes, I guess. And hopefully from among those things, as I say, you'll come away with something that can help you in your particular circumstance. Okay, so we'll start off with a point on culture, which is that ideas can and should actually come from anywhere. Creativity should not be limited to the quote-unquote creatives. Great copywriting ideas can sometimes come from people who are not copywriters, and I've often seen really smart design solutions come from people who otherwise could just not draw a stick figure. So ideas can literally come from anyone in your team. And if you've been racking your brain trying to solve something for ages, ask someone else. How would you solve this? How would you show that feature XYZ makes your life easier? How would you express that the content curation in our app is best in class? Bring someone from performance marketing or from your finance team or from your HR team into a workshop or a brainstorm. They may not be used to this, so be a good human and schedule it ahead of time and make sure that they have enough context about the app to be able to contribute. But they might welcome a chance to do something different, and you in turn are going to get a completely different perspective on the thing that you're doing. If you are in the fortunate position of having many consultants or specialists or designers or copywriters, get them to do some guest work on an account, just once in a while. It doesn't have to be a big operational thing. But bring someone who works on account A to work on account B in a small enough way that they don't need to have a massive onboarding, but with enough context that they can actually contribute. It will probably energize them for their work on their regular account as well, which is a nice little side bonus. Now, in order to facilitate this, it's very important, very, very important to make sure that no one feels stupid offering their point of view, right? Because people are going to be shy. Not everyone has a thick skin, and sometimes a rejection of an idea can feel quite personal. And the likelihood of them offering up something else in future becomes drastically smaller. So don't immediately analyze ideas. Just see where they go. Sometimes a shit idea can be the fertilizer for a good one. Copyright Stuart Miller, 2022. So you can have a review round later where you can filter out the trash from the treasure. But in the beginning, don't shoot any ideas down. Just document them all and let it spark some discussion. Also, make sure to ask for the opinion of people who aren't offering anything voluntarily, because it's sometimes the quiet ones who are hiding something gold. Last point on this is, like all cultural matters, this is not really a quick fix. You're not going to be able to cultivate this over 1 or 2 sessions and then hope it sticks. It's a slow-growing plant, and it needs really regular watering. Okay, so that's a good segue into a point around people, which is to let them contribute with their passions. So different people are going to have different competencies, different things that they are good at, different things that they enjoy. And you should ask yourself if you can open up a space in your workflow for that, right? When it comes to the designers in my team, for example, some are really good at comping together photographic images. Some like to solve problems with really carefully crafted typography. Others can illustrate in various different styles. So it's a different strokes for different folks type of vibe. Sometimes, of course, there isn't going to be that much room for this, right? When there are really inflexible brand guidelines or strict product no-nos, and that's fine. But I'm going to share with you 2 examples where something quite utilitarian was turned into something beautiful because a designer decided to use an approach that resonated with them first. My mouth is dry as in a desert. Okay, so this is the first example is the cover for the ASO ebook, which Peggy already mentioned, and I'm sure some of you have maybe already seen. This isn't a store asset, yes, I know, but it does show how something that could have been quite plain, maybe like a minimalistic device with some algorithms behind it and the store logos, and spoiler alert, that's what I did for the last ASO ebook cover, and it wasn't that great. But anyway, this was actually turned into something quite unexpected, and if you ask me, quite beautiful, because the person who did this was given a little bit of space to inject their own skills. And this was done by Javi, who's a volunteer somewhere. There he is. And the treatment of this, or the idea behind this, led to subsequent ideas for the inside of the book, and it's turned out really, really well. And I'm super proud of the team that worked on this, and as Peggy said, we did just win a Web Excellence Award for the art direction. Yeah, so really good outcome there. But for a more store-specific example, so these are some older screenshots that we did for a mobile security app called Norton 360. It's a great app. It's very secure, it's very easy to use, very intuitive, but it's also not particularly complex, and it can be quite tricky to make something like that feel fresh and exciting, especially over a long period of time, right? And for a while, we were making smaller adjustments. We were switching out the photography. We were tweaking the captions. But as I mentioned in the challenge, sometimes that can start to feel a little bit same. And so the designer who was working on this, his name was Tomasz, decided to see what he could do with his love of digital illustration, something that resonated with him first. So what he did was he created some city visuals with a touch of cyberpunk. I wish it reflected better on the screen, but I promise you it looks much better on a laptop. Anyway, if you live in this wonderful city, you might recognize the Fernsehturm and the yellow S-Bahn. And so basically he created some graphic artworks that were just really like cinematic pieces of juicy goodness. That's the technical term, juicy goodness, for different cities. And they worked very well in our screenshots. The app itself isn't different, right? But the listing now really stands out compared to the competitors, and it looks kind of slick and modern, and obviously it's a pretty vast departure from what we were doing previously. And you may recognize some other locales, one from the US. Just going to give you a few seconds to soak up the goodness. One from the UK. Also one from Japan. I can't really share the performance data on this, but it's safe to say that the results of these experiments were very, very positive. All because we let Tomasz kind of lead with what he loved, right? So ask yourself how you can open up opportunities in your workflow to account for different competencies in your team. Okay, a process now, which we feel is really important, is regularly checking the reviews. Hopefully many of you are already doing that, and this is not going to be news for you. Someone once told me that users will often understand the value of an app better than the publishers themselves. I'll let you decide if that's the case, but you're probably going to be able to find something interesting in those reviews. Maybe a few users are lavishing praise on a feature that you don't really push that hard in the store, or maybe perhaps someone has provided insight into a surprising real-world use case, or simply express something in a phrasing that kind of jumps off the screen, right? It's a standard part of our research process when we begin working with an app, but it should also be something that's looked at regularly. And it's a really great idea to have both product and marketing teams aware of what's being said in the space. So what I'd suggest is actually screenshotting a few of the most surprising or interesting reviews that you find and bring them to your next brainstorm. And brainstorming is something which we'll cover in a bit. But yeah, the reviews, as I said, are a big one. We've talked about the CRO loop, which is this framework in other conferences and in articles, but consulting the reviews is something that features quite fundamentally in that framework. And there's more detail on this in the ebook, but also freely available online. Cool. Another process that I personally strongly believe in is using the power of groups. There's sort of a friction or collision of interpretation and ideas which actually is just really productive at sparking and generating new stuff. Now the cadence with which you may want to do brainstorms is going to depend on your pace of experimentation and your schedule and probably some other factors. But we find that the sweet spot is somewhere between once a month and once a quarter. And how it works is as follows. Everyone brings a handful of rough ideas to this brainstorm, right? Half of which are directly related to your product or to your category. It could be something that your competitors are doing. It could be something from your product roadmap, from data about feature usage, might indeed be from the reviews. And the other half of the ideas, which are a little broader. This can be anything from a cool visual treatment to a great expression of value in a completely different app. It doesn't really matter. Each person then presents those ideas to the group. Those ideas collide with other people's ideas, and you eventually get a sizable output of rough directions or things to try, each of which have, hopefully at this point, had input from other people in the group. And then you can, as I said earlier, strategically decide which of those ideas to refine and polish. We're talking about it here in the context of ASO, but it works equally well for performance marketing as well. However, this really requires that people first bring a range of ideas to that session, right? Okay, I've got 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to rush. This is called nominal brainstorming. It basically means brainstorming in smaller groups or as individuals. So what we do, the process that we've taken, is that we set up a shared document. So this could be in Figma, this could be in Google Slides, this could be in Miro, whatever works for you. And then we tag people. So Bella, your ideas go here. Stuart, your ideas go here. Natalie, your ideas go here. And then those people go away, draw on their own perspectives and inspirations, and bring their ideas to the table, or in this case, the document. They add one image and one paragraph of text per idea, and then they present that in the session. Now, the sort of secret sauce here is actually, I think, the tagging of people in those slides, because it adds a tiny amount of pressure, right? Your name is on this space, and you've got to fill it with something. And if you're safeguarding the kind of safe to be creative culture that I talked about a little bit earlier, this actually offsets quite nicely, right? It's not too much pressure, it's just enough. And at the end, you end up with a whole bunch of new raw material to work with. Okay, so this one falls somewhere between culture and processes, and that is leveraging new possibilities. Now, when Apple and Google roll out new features for us to work with in the store, that unlocks, obviously, new places to test, new relationship between elements, new connections between the product and the marketing of that product. The artwork for in-app events has different rules and specifications to screenshots, obviously, because they're used for different things, right? CPPs, custom product pages, allow us to test on a far larger scale than before and necessitate sort of synergies between ASO and performance marketing. When these type of things are released, see if you can carve out a longer meeting slot for your team. Maybe this is a good opportunity for an offsite. You should treat the announcements of these type of new features as mini events, right? So what that means is before you get people together, grant ownership to one person for setting the context, gathering all the technical information and details required, and then introing all of that stuff to the other people, and essentially setting the stage. And if you're the one doing the intros and setting the context and introducing the topic, be excited, be enthusiastic, because that kind of stuff is immediately infectious and changes the entire energy of that little brainstorm. And so frame the developments you're talking about as an exciting opportunity to try things out and to drive impact where you couldn't drive impact before. And then see what you can come up with a team. Okay, last slide, I promise. Last but certainly not least is the importance of disconnecting. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I think if you were to Google anything related to maintaining creativity over the long term, or if you ask a competent creative director, I guarantee that you will find most include advice about an intentional disconnect. And I think this is important at two levels. At the individual level, go for a run, walk your dog, take a pottery class, whatever that may be. But a change in scenery and a change of brain waves actually does wonders for your ability to look at a problem with fresh eyes. So that's at the first level. And at the second level, I think it's really important as a team as well. You know, grab a beer together, share a weekly show and tell that has nothing to do with ASO. Probably shouldn't say that at an ASO conference, but here we are. What we try to do with our team internally is have a design weekly, which is 1 hour where someone shares a personal project or a cool new tool that they've been playing around with, or even something we call a creative challenge. It sounds a little bit arbitrary, but I promise you that the energy we generate by doing those things together as a team spills over into the regular day-to-day work. And when you reinforce those bonds, let's call them, that you have with the team, it feeds back into what I was talking about culture, and your collective creative output is going to be much, much richer over the long term. Cool. Thank you very much for your time. I'm very happy to discuss this at any point during the day with you guys. I probably won't be hard to find in the shirt, so come say hi, and I hope you got something out of it. Thanks very much.